Roast level is the first thing a lot of people, including me, look at when they're buying coffee. But there are so many confusing terms out there for different roasts. And more often, I've noticed that the roast level isn't even labeled on the bag, which is even more confusing. So I set out to find out what the deal is with all these roast levels, why they're disappearing from coffee packaging, and what all this means for how you should actually choose your coffee. This is MinuteFood. Green coffee beans, the raw seeds of the coffee plant, smell and taste like, well, seeds. In order for them to become delicious, complex, and coffee-y, they have to be roasted. So if I wanted to get a handle on roast levels, I had to understand what exactly happens during roasting. Luckily, I have an awesome local coffee roaster who is happy to bring me in and spill the beans on the roasting process. The very first thing that happens is that coffee beans are grown, harvested, processed, and acquired by roasters. But as important as this stuff is to the final product, we are going to fast forward through it all here. Roasting starts when the raw beans are poured into a roaster, often a big machine like this, which tosses the beans around and around and around and heats them up. Their temperature begins to rise, breaking down the heat-sensitive chlorophyll in the beans, turning them from green to kind of a yellowish gray, and evaporating the moisture out of them. As the beans dry out, their temperature begins to rise faster. This heat starts triggering tons of different chemical reactions. Some unlock compounds in the beans themselves, and others, like the Maillard reaction, produce new compounds that add both flavor and color. Lots of complicated stuff happens during roasting, and the process itself is a seriously skilled science. So there is a ton more to be said about roasting. But here, I really just want to give you the info you need to have a basic but solid understanding of roast levels. Eventually, the beans get so hot that they begin to burn, basically turning to carbonized shells of their former selves. At some carefully selected point between this and that, the beans are dumped out of the machine and quickly cooled. The point at which this happens is what determines the bean's roast level. The awesome folks at Colorado River Coffee Roasters were nice enough to pull beans at several different points during a roast for me. And you can see that once the beans actually start roasting, right around here, they basically get darker and darker. So it's no surprise that the most common way to describe roast levels is by their color: light, medium, or dark, or some combination. But you'll also come across a bunch of different, way less descriptive terms. This is the basic progression of roast levels. But as we'll explain in a bit, you should be careful about linking any of these terms, even the color ones, to specific colors of beans. Plus, although color may be the most obvious difference, roast level is really about flavor. Now, it's easy to assume that, because the roasting process releases and produces flavors, the darker the roast, the more flavorful the coffee. But that's not really the case. Instead, beans on this end of the spectrum have different kinds of flavors than beans over here. As coffee grows, all sorts of factors, like the soil type, the altitude, the temperature, and even the eventual harvesting and processing, all that stuff helps determine the chemistry of the beans themselves. Most of the reactions that happen early in the roasting process act on this internal chemistry, releasing organic compounds that tend to have planty flavors, like fruitiness, floralness, and acidity. So lighter roasted beans will have lots of these kinds of flavors, which you might hear coffee enthusiasts refer to with the admittedly pretentious term origin characteristics. They're basically the taste of the beans themselves. But as roasting continues and the temperature rises, a lot of those compounds start breaking down, decreasing the amount of those flavors intrinsic to the beans themselves. What's more, at higher temps, the Maillard reaction really gets rolling, producing tons of its own roasty, toasty compounds. So the darker the roast, the more products of the Maillard reaction, and the less of the bean's own chemistry you'll taste. This is a major reason why big commercial roasters like Starbucks, Peet's, and Folgers roast their coffee so dark. They want to churn out coffee that tastes consistent, bag after bag after bag. And darker roasts, even if they're made with really different beans, tend to taste pretty similar. They taste like, well, Maillard. Most smaller specialty roasters, on the other hand, have a totally different goal. They work hard to source interesting, high-quality coffee, and they want you to be able to taste the unique characteristics of those beans. That's why specialty coffees tend to have lighter roast levels. And because different types of roasters basically work on different ends of the spectrum, their ideas of various roast levels can vary wildly. I mean, check out this blonde roast, basically a light roast from Starbucks. It's just about as dark as this medium dark roast from a specialty roaster. In other words, there is no actual industry standardization of roast levels. Roasters can label and market their roasts however they like. And that can be really confusing to someone looking to buy a specific roast of coffee. Partially because of that confusion, but also thanks to a few other factors, like common biases about various roast levels, and the rise of specialty coffee, which is supposed to be more about the beans than the roast level. It's becoming more and more common to see bags of coffee that omit the roast level completely. So considering the confusing coffee landscape, how are you supposed to buy coffee you're likely to like? The key is here, the flavor notes. I know they seem annoying and pretentious, but they do hold good clues to what's actually inside the bag. Words that refer to fruitiness, floralness, or acidity, like lemon, tea, honey, rose, even off-the-wall ones like Fruity Pebbles. Or descriptors like tangy, bright, or vibrant should clue you in that you're looking at a lighter roast. Anything darker or heavier? Terms like smoky, spicy, tobacco, toasted, cacao, dark chocolate, caramel, toffee, or basically anything else that makes you think of the roasty toasty products of the Maillard reaction indicates a darker roast. In-between descriptors like milk chocolate, jam, or juice often suggest that the coffee leans toward a more middle-of-the-road roast. Honestly, even if the roast level is listed, it's worth checking the flavor notes. Remember that blonde Starbucks roast that was surprisingly dark? The notes refer to toasted malt, which is a good clue that this is not actually a particularly light roast. There is some momentum to standardize roast levels in an effort to make this whole coffee buying thing less confusing for consumers. And scientists and roasters are working on various ways to actually do that. But for now, you have to make some educated guesses. Sometimes you might not get exactly what you're looking for, but maybe that's not a bad thing. You could stumble on something you like even better. In my mind, there are only a few things more important than coffee. One of them is democracy, yet not that many people actually vote. Less than half of people under 30 vote in presidential elections. And as a result, the electorate, and by extension, the representation in government, is skewed toward the older and wealthier. The magnitude of this issue can make people feel helpless, but there's actually something really easy you can do about it. Download Tab for a Cause, which right now is supporting Vote America in their effort to make sure every eligible American has their voice heard in our democracy. Every time you open a tab, and if you're like me, you open a lot of tabs, Tab for a Cause will donate to Vote America with zero cost to you. This is a total win-win. Go help strengthen democracy at tabfordemocracy.org/MinuteFood.